You slept. Not badly. Not a few hours on the couch. You actually slept. The full night. Maybe even longer than usual. And you woke up tired. Not groggy. Not slow to start. Tired in a way that sleep didn't touch. The kind of tired that's already there before you've had time to remember what day it is. That specific heaviness, the one that a full night of sleep somehow made no difference to, is what this video is about. Because if you've watched our video on why you wake up exhausted even after sleeping all night, you already know that sleep and nervous system recovery are not the same thing. What we're going to do today is go one layer deeper. Not just why the sleep didn't restore you, but what restoration actually requires. What the nervous system specifically needs that sleep alone cannot provide. And why most people never get it. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because nobody told them it was a separate process entirely. Here's the version of rest most people are working with. You stop doing things. You lie down. You sleep. You wake up. You should feel better. That's the model, and it works. For physical fatigue. If your muscles are tired from physical labor, sleep restores them. The body repairs tissue, consolidates energy stores, runs its maintenance processes. That part of rest works, but the nervous system has a different kind of fatigue, and it responds to a different kind of restoration. The nervous system doesn't get tired the way muscles do. It doesn't get depleted the way fuel gets depleted. It gets dysregulated, pushed out of a window, a range of activation that allows you to think clearly, feel present, respond proportionally to what's actually happening, and held there, outside that window, for long enough that dysregulation becomes the default state. And dysregulation doesn't resolve with sleep, because sleep, for a dysregulated nervous system, is not the same experience as sleep for a regulated one. A regulated nervous system enters sleep already in a state that allows it to move through restorative sleep stages effectively. Heart rate variability high, parasympathetic dominant, body already settling before the eyes close. A dysregulated nervous system brings its activation into sleep. Shallow breathing, elevated cortisol baseline, fragmented transitions. The system stays partially mobilized even in unconsciousness, monitoring, processing, never fully releasing, so the body sleeps. But the nervous system stays on, and you wake up with the accumulated weight of hours of incomplete restoration. Not because your sleep was technically insufficient, but because sleep was doing the work alone. The work that, for the nervous system, requires more than sleep. Most people discover this pattern through a process of elimination. They sleep more, still tired. They cut caffeine, still tired. They try supplements, routines, earlier bedtimes. Still tired. They go to a doctor and the tests come back normal, which is its own kind of confusing because something is clearly not working, and yet every external measure says it should be. This is when people start to accept the tiredness as simply part of who they are. I'm just not a morning person. I've always needed more sleep than others. My energy has never been great. These become identities. Ways of explaining a chronic state that has never had a satisfying explanation. But here's what those explanations miss. The tiredness isn't constitutional. It's not a fixed trait of who you are. It's a symptom of a nervous system that has been outside its window of tolerance for long enough that it no longer remembers what it feels like to be inside it. And that has nothing to do with how much you sleep. It has to do with whether the nervous system ever received what it actually needs to return to that window. Which brings us to the question that the rest of this video is going to answer. What does the nervous system actually need to recover? Not just the body, but the system itself in a way that sleep alone cannot provide. The answer has three parts, each one coming from a different branch of neuroscience, each one pointing to the same thing. And the first part is going to require us to talk about something you've almost certainly experienced, but probably never connected to recovery before. Let's start with the window of tolerance. The term comes from the work of psychiatrist Daniel Siegel, and it describes the zone of nervous system activation within which a person can function effectively, not too activated, not flooded with anxiety, urgency, reactivity, not too deactivated, not shut down, flat, disconnected. In the window, you can think clearly. You can feel your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. You can respond to what's actually in front of you, rather than to a threat the system is projecting. Above the window, hyperarousal, heart rate elevated, thoughts racing, body braced. The system is mobilized, looking for the threat, ready to respond. Below the window, hypoarousal, flatness, disconnection, heaviness, fog. The system has gone into conservation mode, shutting down non-essential processes to preserve the minimum necessary to survive. Chronic fatigue that doesn't resolve with sleep almost always involves one of these two states, or a cycle between them. You might recognize the cycle. Periods of being wired, can't switch off, mind racing, followed by crashes of complete depletion, where getting off the couch feels genuinely difficult. Up, then down. Activated, then collapsed. This is not a personality rhythm. This is a nervous system oscillating outside its window, never fully returning to the zone where restoration is actually possible. Because here's what most people don't realize. Restoration, genuine nervous system recovery, only happens inside the window. Sleep doesn't return you to the window if you weren't in it to begin with. It suspends you in whatever state the system was in when you lay down, which means the path to genuine recovery doesn't start with sleep. It starts with returning to the window and then sleeping from there. This is where the vagus nerve becomes essential. The vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the autonomic nervous system, is the primary pathway through which the parasympathetic branch communicates safety to the body. And vagal tone, the health and responsiveness of this pathway, is what determines how easily the system can return from activation or shutdown back into the window of tolerance. High vagal tone means the system is flexible. It can move into activation when needed and return to regulation efficiently afterward, like a rubber band that stretches and returns. Low vagal tone means the system is rigid. It can move into activation, but it gets stuck there, or it collapses from activation directly into shutdown without passing through regulation. And chronic stress, sustained pressure, accumulated incomplete cycles, long periods of operating at or beyond the system's capacity, degrades vagal tone over time, not permanently, not irreversibly, but measurably, which means a system that has been under chronic load has literally lost some of its capacity to return itself to the window of tolerance. It's not that the system doesn't want to regulate. It's that the infrastructure for regulation has been worn down by the ongoing demand on it. And this is why rest without recovery is so common. You stop the external demands. You sleep. But the system, with its degraded capacity for self-regulation, doesn't have enough vagal tone to complete the return to window. So you sleep, and the system stays outside, and you wake up in the same place you lay down, or somewhere slightly worse, because now there's the added weight of having rested and still feeling unrested. If you've been carrying this pattern for a while, if the tiredness has become so familiar that you've started to think of it as just who you are, consider subscribing to this channel and sharing this video with someone who might recognize what you're describing. Not because this video is going to fix it, but because understanding the mechanism is the first thing that needs to happen before anything else can. You can't solve a problem you've been misidentifying as a personality trait. Now, vagal tone can be restored, but not the way most people try to restore it. Not by pushing harder, not by adding more techniques to the morning routine, not by optimizing sleep hygiene further. The nervous system restores vagal tone through inputs that speak its specific language. And those inputs are not what most productivity or wellness content talks about. They're quieter than that, more specific. And in some cases, they go against what we've been taught about rest and recovery entirely. There are 3 primary inputs that restore vagal tone and return the system to its window. We're going to go through each one in detail, starting with the one that requires the least effort and produces the most immediate, measurable effect. And it's something you've done thousands of times today, without realizing it could be used this way. Before we go into the 3 inputs, let's take a moment to make sure we're oriented. We've covered a lot of ground, and the YouTube studio told us that around the 10-minute mark, attention needs to be reset. So here's a direct question for you, not rhetorical. Actually pause and consider it. When was the last time you felt genuinely restored after resting? Not just less tired, genuinely restored, present, clear, like the weight had actually lifted. For most people listening to this, that memory is not recent. Hold that for a moment, because what we're about to go through isn't a list of tips. It's an explanation of why that feeling became so rare and what the nervous system actually needs for it to become possible again. The first input is breath, but not breathing in the generic sense. Specifically, the physiological sigh. This is a naturally occurring breathing pattern, a double inhale followed by a long, slow exhale that the nervous system uses spontaneously to regulate itself during periods of stress. You've done this involuntarily. The sharp intake of breath that happens when you've been holding tension for too long, followed by a long release. In 2023, researchers at Stanford, Andrew Huberman's lab, among others, demonstrated that a single intentional physiological sigh produces measurable, immediate reduction in subjective anxiety and physiological arousal, not after 20 minutes of mindfulness, in real time, in a single breath cycle. The mechanism: the extended exhale directly activates the vagus nerve, increasing vagal tone, slowing heart rate, and shifting the autonomic balance in the direction of parasympathetic dominance. The double inhale specifically re-expands the alveoli in the lungs, the small sacs that collapse slightly under shallow stress breathing, which allows the subsequent exhale to release a larger volume of carbon dioxide. And it's that carbon dioxide release that produces the physiological calming signal. This is not relaxation as a concept. This is a chemical signal the body uses to tell the nervous system, the urgency is lower now. One physiological sigh, 2 short inhales through the nose followed by a slow exhale through the mouth, won't restore a depleted nervous system. But repeated consistently throughout the day, especially in the moments after a stressor resolves, it begins to provide what the system was not getting: micro moments of genuine return toward the window. Not a substitute for sleep, a signal that allows sleep, when it comes, to be more restorative. The second input is body-based movement, specifically what's called discharge movement. We touched on this in a previous video, the way animals complete their stress response through physical tremor and movement after a threat passes. For the human nervous system, the equivalent is any movement that is slow enough to keep cortical control low, rhythmic enough to engage the cerebellum, and continuous enough to allow the system to begin completing whatever activation cycle was left open. Walking is the most accessible version of this, not power walking, not walking with a podcast to distract. Walking with low visual stimulation, ideally outdoors, ideally without a destination that matters, where the rhythm of the movement can do what it's designed to do. Research on walking and autonomic regulation consistently shows measurable increases in heart rate variability, the primary marker of vagal tone, after even 20 minutes of low-intensity rhythmic movement. The system doesn't need to be pushed. It needs to be accompanied, moved gently through the completion of something it started but never finished. The crucial distinction: this is not exercise for fitness. This is movement as nervous system input. The goal is not exertion. The goal is rhythm, and what the body does with rhythm when it's allowed to. The third input is the most counterintuitive and the most powerful. It's called co-regulation. And it operates through a mechanism that has nothing to do with words, advice, or problem solving. Co-regulation is the biological process by which one nervous system regulates its own state through proximity to another regulated system. Stephen Porges's research on the social engagement system shows that the ventral vagal complex, the most evolutionarily recent branch of the vagus nerve, responsible for the highest states of regulated connection, is activated not by internal effort, but by specific external social cues. A warm, resonant voice, facial expressions of genuine safety, eye contact that doesn't feel evaluative, proximity without demand. These signals, received through the social engagement system, directly increase vagal tone in ways that solitary rest cannot replicate. This is why, as we discussed in the previous video, co-regulation is one of the most powerful tools for nervous system recovery, and it's also why isolation, even comfortable isolation, can maintain dysregulation even when the body is resting. The nervous system evolved in social groups not just for protection from external threats, but because other regulated systems were the primary environment in which individual systems learn to regulate. Alone, the system has to generate safety from within, using internal resources that, under chronic load, are already depleted. In the presence of a regulated other, the system has an external reference point, a signal it can borrow, match, and use to find its way back to the window. This doesn't require therapy or deep conversation. It can be as simple as the presence of a calm person in the same room. A phone call where someone's voice is genuinely steady. A shared silence that carries no urgency. The nervous system doesn't need the relationship to be profound. It needs the signal to be real. So let's bring this together and look at what we actually know now about why the body can rest while the nervous system doesn't. The body and the nervous system are not the same system. They share a body, but they recover through different mechanisms, on different timelines, through different inputs. Physical rest, lying down, sleeping, stopping the external demands, restores the body. Nervous system recovery requires something more specific. It requires a return to the window of tolerance, and then it requires staying there long enough for the system to complete what it started. The window of tolerance is the zone of activation within which the nervous system can genuinely process, integrate, and restore. Outside that window, either in hyperarousal or hypoarousal, recovery is not available. Sleep is not a shortcut to the window. It suspends you in whatever state you're in when you fall asleep. A dysregulated system that falls asleep is a dysregulated system that wakes up. Vagal tone is the capacity of the nervous system to return itself to the window. Chronic stress degrades vagal tone, and degraded vagal tone means the system loses its flexibility, its ability to stretch and return, rather than getting stuck in activation or collapse. 3 inputs restore vagal tone and move the system back toward the window. Breath, specifically the extended exhale. The physiological sigh. Double inhale through the nose, slow exhale through the mouth. Not a breathing exercise in the performance sense. A signal. A message to the autonomic nervous system that the urgency is lower now. Rhythmic movement, not for fitness, for completion. Walking without destination or stimulation. Allowing the body's movement to provide the discharge that accumulated stress cycles need in order to close. Co-regulation. Proximity to another regulated nervous system. Not advice, not solutions. A warm voice, a steady presence, contact without demand. The external safety signal that allows the system to borrow a reference point it can no longer generate entirely on its own. None of these are dramatic. None of them require significant time or resources. But all of them require one thing that is genuinely difficult for a dysregulated system. They require slowing down enough to receive them. This is the part that doesn't get said often enough. Recovery is not a passive event. It's not something that happens to you while you wait. But it's also not something you can force. You can't think your way into regulation. You can't effort your way into the window. You can't optimize your way into a settled nervous system. What you can do is stop doing the things that keep the system outside the window and create the conditions for the inputs that move it back in. That's a different kind of work than most people are used to. Not harder, but different. Less about adding, more about making space for what's already available. Let's go through the new concepts from this video one final time, because there's a lot here, and it's worth letting it land clearly. The window of tolerance, Daniel Siegel's framework, is the zone of activation within which the nervous system can function, process, and restore. Hyperarousal is above it. Hypoarousal is below it. Sleep cannot return you to the window. Only inputs that speak the nervous system's language can. Vagal tone, the health and responsiveness of the vagus nerve pathway, determines how quickly and easily the system can return to the window. Chronic stress degrades vagal tone. This is measurable, and it's reversible, not through effort, but through specific inputs. The physiological sigh, double inhale, extended exhale, is a naturally occurring and intentionally usable breath pattern that produces immediate, measurable increases in parasympathetic activation. It's not a breathing technique, it's a signal the body already knows. Discharge movement, slow, rhythmic, low destination movement, allows the body to complete stress cycles that were opened and never finished. The goal is not exertion, the goal is rhythm and completion. Co-regulation, the biological process of one nervous system finding its way toward the window through proximity to another regulated system, is not a metaphor for emotional support. It's a direct autonomic mechanism operating through the social engagement system and the ventral vagal complex that increases vagal tone through external social cues. And the central insight underneath all of it: your body rested, your nervous system didn't. Not because you did anything wrong, not because something is broken in you, because rest for the body and recovery for the nervous system are two different processes, and for most of your life, you've only been doing one of them. Now, here's something that follows naturally from all of this. We've talked about why the nervous system needs certain inputs to recover. We've talked about why isolation makes recovery harder. We've talked about co-regulation, what it does, why it matters. But there's something we haven't touched yet that sits beneath all of it. For some people, the nervous system doesn't just struggle to recover alone. It struggles to feel safe even in the moments that we're supposed to be safe, even in calm rooms, even with people who care, even in silence that carries no threat. The system stays alert, scanning, waiting, braced, not because danger is present, but because it learned, at some point, that calm itself could not be trusted. That stillness was the moment before something happened. That relaxing was what you did right before you were caught off guard. And that learned association between calm and incoming danger is what the next video is about. Because understanding why safety feels unsafe is its own conversation, and it's one that a lot of people have been waiting a long time to have.